Good afternoon, Lagos, Nigeria, Israel, Amsterdam, Europe, America, London, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Borderlines, the only show that takes you beyond borders. My name is Ireti Bakare-Yusuf, and today I have a wonderful and amazing, a most inspiring guest with me. It's an absolute pleasure, an inspiring pleasure, a most uplifting one, because people like my guest reminds us of what everything is about, and that's humanity, that's children, and that means all of us, irrespective of race, creed, gender, or whatever you are. Okay? So we're on Borderlines, and we're going to be talking about, I told you earlier, we're going to be talking about the children. My guest is Steve Sosebee. I don't know if I've pronounced it right, but he will correct me. He is the founder. He just gave me a thumbs up. He is the founder of Heal Palestine. Let me tell you something. Steve's story, his personal story, and I had to research him, of course, as we do to get prepared for the show, is even more uplifting. So you've got to listen. You will be able to call in on 0201 277 0993. Female line is 0201 465 7190. And the WhatsApp, you know how it is. This is Borderlines. Whilst I'm in conversation with Steve, you can send WhatsApp messages because I don't want to be interrupted. 0809-597-5805. And somewhere, when there's time near the show, I will open up the lines for you to ask Steve any questions you wish to. Steve, welcome to Borderlines, Nigeria Info.
Thank you for having me. And I want to just say, how honored I am to be on your show, and I look forward to the conversation.
Oh, we're honored to have you. Like I said, you inspire me, you inspire my executive producer, Tatiana, you inspire the whole team. And, you know, as the show that's actually been covering this awful conflict, genocide, some call it war, but, you know, I'll let you call it whatever you want. You know, since it started, we like to bring as many different guests as possible, because the whole idea is not only to educate people, but to raise awareness that there are several factors and facets to this issue. So, talk to us about Heal Palestine.
Well, obviously, what's happening on the ground in Gaza requires an immense amount of effort to help, first of all, to stop this ongoing genocide and to put an end to the killing, which every single day we see scenes of absolute horror, of unimaginable cruelty, and terrible suffering on the part of the people there. I've been working in Palestine for over 30 years, doing this kind of humanitarian work. And I had done that work previously under a different organization that I founded back during the early 90s. But however, in January 1st, I left that organization and moved on to start Heal Palestine, to take on a more holistic and grassroots effort, not only in providing health services and health care for injured children and for the population in general. And I can speak a little bit about what those programs are in detail if that's interesting, but also in education, where I think there's a huge amount of potential to help rebuild the lives of these kids and provide direct humanitarian aid, considering that people are starving, people are going without basic clothing, medication, clean water, food, shelter. You know, we can come in and help provide that support and help save lives. And then the final one, so HEAL stands for Health, Education, Aid, and Leadership. The leadership one is really, in the long term, helping to rebuild the lives of these kids who've lost their legs, who've lost parents, or who've been injured on a permanent basis and need support to be independent the rest of their lives. In the area of some of the things we're doing in the health field right now is that we're running a field hospital in Gaza. As many of your listeners probably know, the health system in Gaza has been decimated. Hospitals have been bombed. In 2019, we opened a cancer hospital in Gaza for children. On November 5th, that hospital was bombed. Those kids with cancer were dispersed into the refugee camps, into the bombed cities, and And so therefore, the whole health system in general has collapsed. We've opened a field hospital and provide treatment, primary care, and other surgical services for thousands of people each week in Gaza. In addition to that, we run a mental health program. As you can imagine, the entire population of Gaza has been severely traumatized psychologically as a result of enduring what is an unimaginable situation of death, destruction, displacement. 90% of the people have had their homes destroyed or are living in schools or shelters or tents throughout Gaza. Many of them have been displaced 7, 8, 9 times. So we're providing the psychological support that people need there is overwhelming. The children in particular, there's 1 million children in Gaza out of the population, more than 1 million out of 2.4 million people. Every one of those kids is traumatized from what they've experienced and what they've seen firsthand with the overall destruction around them, the killing of their relatives and friends, their own injuries. So undoing that trauma psychologically is one of our goals and objectives and one of the work and programs that we're currently undertaking. We also have we're sending medical teams into Gaza. That's become more complicated due to the closure of the Rafah crossing back in early May. And finally, we are bringing injured kids out. We're the main organization that is providing free medical care for injured children. We now have 21 children in the United States being treated for free. And all of them are staying with volunteers in the communities, host families. These are kids that are coming in many cases having lost their family members. We have a 11-year-old girl coming to Texas on Saturday whose both parents were killed. Her 5 sisters were killed. A brother of hers was killed in the bombing that took her leg. You can imagine she needs to walk again. We need to rebuild her life physically, but we also need to rebuild her life psychologically and emotionally and give her education. She hasn't been in school for a year now. So all of these are the things that our organization has taken on. It's a holistic approach. We're a grassroots organization, and we depend on volunteers to support our work and to make it possible to do this kind of effort. Now, for me, as I said, I've been doing this for more than 30 years. It's my honor and my duty to, as a human being, first and foremost, to respond to this genocide, but more importantly, as an American. I'm going to be honest with you. This is not a political show, but let's be honest. The government, my tax money is paying for these bombs that are killing these children in Gaza by the thousands. Over 17,000 children have been killed that are known to have been killed in Gaza since October by American bombs. That blood is on my hands. It's on the hands of my neighbors. It's on the hands of my fellow countrymen. And we have a moral responsibility to undo the killing, the suffering, and the hardship that these children are enduring. So that's the least I can do. And it's an honor to do it. And it's a cause of freedom. It's a human cause. It's a cause of equality. Our brothers and sisters in your continent, in Africa, have endured the scars of colonialism from the Western countries. And you know better than anyone what this means. And this issue in Palestine is a colonial issue. It's settlement. It's displacement based on race, based on religion, based on nationality and ethnicity. And so it's the same struggle. And it's a human struggle. And so I'm honored to stand with the people struggling for freedom, just as I would have stood in a different time with our brothers and sisters in Kenya, in Nigeria, in Algeria, in South Africa, and all of the liberation struggles wherever they take place.
Thank you, Steve. That's an excellent introduction. And it takes us, and I'm glad you mentioned America, because that then takes me to my next question. There's a quote of yours that I have. As Americans, we speak to freedom, but at the same time, we can't ignore the human rights violation. However, yesterday, Kamala Harris said, this war must end. I'm quoting her now. We must get a deal that is about the hostages. She also went on to say, let me be very clear. I am unequivocal and unwavering in my commitment to Israel's defense and its ability to defend itself, and that's not gonna change. That's Kamala Harris there. When you marry that, what she said, those two quotes, with your quote and what you've just said, the fact that America is responsible, and this deal that, the Biden administration keep talking about, where there's a gap there. Talk to us about where that void is, because America continues to supply Israel with ammunition. American taxpayers continue to complain about America giving Israel ammunition. However, possibly the next president of America, she's just said she's unwavering in her commitment to Israel, and she's obviously, that basically means she's not going to change the way America conducts, or the relationship between Israel and America. Talk to us about that. And as an individual, like you said, an American who is about human rights, who works with Palestine, who has been in a relationship, a loving relationship, if I might add, with Palestine for the last 30 years. How? Help us understand that. Help us unpack it.
I'm not sure I can help anybody understand it, because honestly, I don't understand it either. Especially, look, we have two parties in the United States. The right wing party of Donald Trump, they're beyond salvation. They're beyond saving. There's no hope for that party to do right and to do justice. It's basically a white reactionary fascist ideology of Trumpism, and no one should approach them or support them with any hope that they will do right, not only in Palestine, but for people struggling for equality and freedom, not only in this country of the United States, but anywhere in the world. But on the other side, we have a Democratic Party, which is multiracial, multicultural. Kamala Harris is a perfect example of that. Being a woman, coming with parents from diverse backgrounds, being a minority and rising so high up, she should, at first and foremost, take a moral stand as a human being. And she knows that this is an issue of liberation and freedom and equality, that the Palestinian people since 1948, and even before that, thanks to the British colonial enterprise in Palestine, have been struggling for their rights and have been denied those rights in something the equivalent to apartheid that has been imposed upon them in the West Bank and Gaza. This is not a secret. This is not debatable. The experts themselves, our brothers and sisters in South Africa, are the ones who took Israel to the International Court of Justice, claiming that what they were doing was committing genocide and that they had imposed and created an apartheid regime in Palestine. Who knows better than our brothers and sisters in South Africa what apartheid means, what genocide means? They are the most qualified experts in the world to take this moral stand. And yet here we have the prime candidate for one of the two major parties in the United States ignoring the very root. She knows what the truth is of this issue. She knows every day that children are being killed. She knows every day that children are starving and that people are losing their lives and have been suffering unimaginable suffering that we as outside can't even begin to understand what the Gazan people are having to endure every single day of their lives. She knows it. She gets briefed. She has intelligence reports. They come and tell her what's happening. She sees it. And yet she's willing to compromise her values as a human being, as somebody who should be connected to any liberation issue from a moral point of view. She's willing to compromise that for power. And that, to me, indicates that the two-party system in the United States does not represent the will of the people, because the majority of people who support the Democratic Party in the United States, the vast majority of them, 3 out of 4, want an arms embargo on Israel until there is a ceasefire and until they stop using American weapons on innocent civilians in Gaza. 3 out of 4. The Democratic Party doesn't care. That's not where their main donors come from. They don't feel that the American voters who support the Democratic Party are willing to vote on the other side or step away and not vote at all on the issue of Gaza. But they're going to be surprised this November when the young people, particularly those under 30, are not willing to cast a ballot on behalf of the Democratic Party because of their position of not just supporting genocide by blocking ceasefires, blocking UN Security Council resolutions, blocking international law being implemented there, but also providing the very weapons that have left such massive death and destruction on the besieged people of the Gaza Strip. They're not going to win this election. And one of the reasons is because of their position on Gaza and their inability to impose any kind of legal or moral limits on the killing of innocent people in the Gaza Strip. So I'm sorry that they took that position. I think Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party have compromised their values and the so-called values and so-called morals that have defined that party in the past. And as a result, it's going to cost them politically.
Another quote of yours that I want to, and I did collect quite a few quotes of yours.
I see it. Be careful what I say.
Another quote of yours that actually stuck with me, and you know, and again, it reminds us of humanity, but it reminds us of those things that get in the way of our humanity. The quote being, "We do not heal with politics." For me, that was so poignant, it was so powerful, and it was memorable. It is one of the most memorable quotes that I have read. However, you talked about funding, politics, funding, APAC, and that quote. How can we separate politics from healing, as obviously is what you wish?
Of course, we all wish for that. Unfortunately, every aspect of life in Gaza and in Palestine is political. Clean water is political. Education is political. Healthcare is political. Not from how we define it or how it should be defined, but the reality on the ground. Schools are closed in Gaza because of the political decision to impose this kind of war in which 80% of the schools have been destroyed and all of the remaining ones are full of displaced people. Clean water is a political issue. Why? Because a political decision was made to bomb the last desalination plants in Gaza and also bomb the water treatment plants in Gaza. So just basic clean water is impossible to obtain in Gaza for political reasons. Healthcare is political. Something as simple as your father going to the hospital for cancer treatment or for heart surgery is a political issue now because the hospitals have been bombed and there's a political decision made to close down and attack these medical institutions throughout the Gaza Strip. So unfortunately, politics has defined every aspect of life in Gaza. The 11-year-old girl who I mentioned earlier in this interview coming to Texas for an artificial leg and whose whole family was killed, just her, she's a walking political statement as an 11-year-old girl who's lost her leg and lost her family, not because she should be, not because we are making her a political statement, but because now her life, which has been utterly destroyed. Imagine losing your entire family at the age of 11 and your leg. That was a political act. It was a military decision, but the conflict is rooted in politics. There's no military solution to the conflict in Gaza. There's no military solution to the Palestinian question. It's strictly a political solution. And yet, for generations, we've seen now every effort being made to crush and destroy the Palestinian desire to be free, to be equal, to live on their land without restrictions and not under occupation. And as long as politicians decide that there is a solution through the use of force and killing, this conflict will go on until the politicians are willing to sit down, as they did in South Africa, as they've done in so many conflict areas, and finally hammer out a just solution where everyone is equal, regardless of the color of their skin or their religion or their creed or ethnicity. Until that happens, there's going to be a continuous struggle and conflict in which people on all sides, including innocent Israelis, are going to be affected. And nobody wants to see that.
Indeed. One of the, very sort of like a month or so after October 7th, perhaps even 2 months, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said at the UN, he said Israeli leaders consider all Palestinians in Gaza Strip to be terrorists. That's a quote. 17,000 children have been killed. That's the 17,000 that has been accounted for. Nobody knows how many children are actually under the rubble, and it is said over 100,000, some even say perhaps 200,000 are under the rubble. 200,000 people, with 40,000 human lives killed by bombs supplied by America, sent to Gaza by Israel. What does Israel think of children? When Israel think of Gazan children, do they see them as children, or do they see them as representatives of Hamas?
I can't speak on how people see their adversaries, how they define them as humans. I'm not qualified, nor should anyone who's not making those decisions speak on what their intentions are or make assumptions on why they're doing what they're doing. All we can do is look at the results of their actions. And the results of their actions are not just that 17,000 accounted for children have been killed since last October in Gaza, but you have now tens of thousands of children with permanent disabilities. You have tens of thousands of children who've died not from bombs, but from the lack of medication, from the lack of access to medical care because hospitals are shut or closed, or available shipments of medical supplies and equipment have been denied or sit at the border without permit to cross. We can only say that these decisions and these actions indicate that whoever is making these decisions in Israel and in the United States, because the United States is the main supplier of all of the weapons and tools and political support that makes this possible, do not consider the Palestinian children, the Gaza children, as equal human beings, that they do not consider the sanctity of life among that population to be equal to the children who live in their country or in Nigeria or in France or in Italy or anywhere else in the world. Palestinian children have been dehumanized. Their lives don't matter. They don't count. They're just to be considered as potential collateral damage and nothing more. And that's now how you want to define that as to what the intentions are, or how the leaders who are making these decisions view these people. I'm not qualified to say, but I do know that just everywhere in the world today, politicians are making decisions that don't reflect the will of the people, including in this country. I don't think any American, any Nigerian, any Israeli even believes that killing children is justified, except for those who have the most extremist racist points of view. And unfortunately, there are many poisoned minds that are now walking amongst us, but the vast majority of people do consider children to be innocent at all ages and all levels, and that decisions and actions taken that are harming these children are immoral and illegal. That's not reflected in government policy, and that's why we all feel today less and less connected politically to our leaders and more distrustful and cynical about how politics can help benefit humanity. It's just to keep people in power and to continue to ensure access to resources that are increasingly more expensive and difficult to get, not to benefit humanity, not to protect innocent people, not to bring about a more equitable planet for us to share resources and live together as brothers and sisters, but to take more and more for ourselves. And that's the sad reality of politics in 2024.
Indeed it is. Let's talk about Mohammed Abdul Kazam, whose wife gave birth to twins. That was like 2 weeks ago, sometimes around the 18th of August. He gave the wife, Dr. Jimanu, I think it is, gave birth to twins. She was pregnant, she gave birth to twins. And he went to register their birth only to receive a call that his house or their home had been bombed, and he returned to the hospital and found them there. Talk to us about that family, how Mohammed is doing right now, and of course the part that Heal Palestine played in the life of, Dr. Jimanu.
Yeah, we were contacted a few months ago when she was pregnant, Dr. Jimana, who was a pharmacist from northern Gaza and had been displaced as hundreds of thousands of Gazans forcibly displaced from their homes in northern Gaza, pushed to central and south Gaza, and forced to live displaced in their own land. She had nowhere to go, her and her family. She was pregnant with twins, her first children, and was quite concerned about being able to have a safe delivery. As I mentioned earlier, the hospitals have been destroyed. Most of them have been shut, most of them, and are not functioning due to the lack of medication. The killing of doctors and nurses. Over 400 doctors and nurses have been killed in Gaza. Dozens of hospitals and clinics and maternity centers are not functioning. So she was quite concerned that she would not be able to have delivery for her babies. So they reached out to us, and we helped provide her a lot of different basic services, such as prenatal support and lactation training with a doctor here in the United States, virtually. We found for her a place to give birth in a field hospital near where she was residing in Deir al-Balah. And the day that she gave birth, she contacted our staff and thanked us for supporting her. And our staff were preparing to send food over and milk for her newborn babies, to help them, get started and to support her. And then we found out that she was somehow targeted in her apartment and killed along with her mother-in-law and her two newborn babies, only 2 or 3 days old. Extremely tragic. No one knows exactly why she was targeted, or why that apartment was targeted. Unfortunately, this happens too often, and it was brought to light to the international community because of the ability to communicate now through social media and share stories. But it happens quite frequently in Gaza, where people experience these terrible, terrible injustices and having their lives destroyed, and in many cases without the world even knowing about it. Her husband today is, as you can imagine, deeply distraught. At the same time, he's trying to survive. He's also remains in Gaza, and there are no safe places in Gaza. There's no easy access to food. There's no easy access to shelter. There's no easy access to clean water. And he's not only going through this emotional trauma of losing his wife and his two newborn children, but also trying to survive and to continue to live. So we, as I mentioned earlier, cannot even begin to understand or relate to the horrors and the suffering that people in Gaza are enduring every single day, just trying to survive, just trying to help their children survive, just trying to find a meal to feed your kids, or medicine for your sick mother, or even the simple things that we often take for granted. People in Gaza are just basically trying to survive every single day, and it's been going on for nearly a year.
How do mothers, parents, fathers, aunties, even children, those like Mohammed Abdul Kazam, who lose possibly the most precious human gift, blessing to all of us, how do they carry on? Where do they find that strength from? Because there's one thing we've seen from Palestinians, and I say this to people, is that in almost 100 years, the Palestinians have continued to remain resistance, not just resistance, but live in hope in spite of the situation. Where does that come from? Where exactly does that come from?
Thank you for bringing this point up. I think it's very important that we, living in this historical time, acknowledge the courage and resilience of people who've been struggling and sacrificing. Just as we saw the great Nelson Mandela go through decades of solitary confinement and come out unbroken. It's the same, but on a collective level, what the Palestinians are enduring. They are in solitary confinement for decades. They are being abused and tortured for decades, as Mr. Mandela was, and others. And yet they've kept their resolve, and they continue to struggle for their rights and for their freedom. And I think, as somebody who first went to Palestine in 1988 as a university student on a human rights delegation, the first thing that struck me was the kindness and hospitality and humanity of the Palestinian people. And the second thing that struck me was how unjust the occupation was that I saw firsthand over 3 decades ago. And when you balance the compassion and kindness and the courage and resilience of the people with the injustice that they're enduring, and believe me, 30 years ago, the injustice was nothing compared to what it is today in Palestine, I was deeply moved, and I was by their continued efforts. Now, I can only say that these are people with deep faith in God, and most of the Palestinians that I know now believe that your life is written when you're born, and what happens to you is the God's will and God's decision, and you cannot question it because it was already written. And whether that's true or not, no one knows, but it gives them the ability to accept whatever happens to them as God's will, and that in the afterlife they will be able to know the answers to why they have had to endure such hardship and suffering, and also enjoy respite in that they will no longer be treated and suffer to this kind of injustice or imposed suffering, that they will finally be able to breathe and enjoy peace, tranquility, and happiness.
I've often had people, they still do, would ask, why Palestinians would say, their child has been martyred, or the husband would say their wives have been martyred, and that word martyr is what you've just explained to us now. Is that, I guess, when one gets to a place of human powerlessness, one turns to spirituality. And
We
then,
saw,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I just say we saw it in our own country here in the United States. When first we had the genocide of the African population, which were uprooted and brought to the United States for 250 years enslaved, and then another 100 years of discrimination and Jim Crow laws, especially in the South, but everywhere in the country. We saw the leadership of the resistance to slavery and also to the discrimination of our African brothers and sisters in this country. They were religious leaders, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Both of them deeply religious men, deeply spiritual men, but also men who strove for freedom and for justice for their people. I think that's not uncommon when people are subjected to injustice and suffering for generations, that there is a very strong spiritual dimension to the ability for those people to carry on and resist and to work for justice and freedom based on their spiritual beliefs and their faith. It's not uncommon. We see it in Palestine. We saw it in many liberation movements.
Polio is one of the diseases that has now returned to Palestine. Polio, which was been eradicated for some 25 odd years. And now it has returned. And we're hearing that Israel has agreed for pauses, whatever that means, so that polio vaccines could be spread out. But like you said on George Galloway's show, polio knows no borders. Whilst the pauses might be good, of course, but really, is it too late? Too little, too late? Can it stop the spreading of polio, given the constant displacement of families and people and the movements?
I think 3 days is not enough to provide the kind of inoculation of children and people in Gaza during this terrible crisis. In addition to that, it may be too late, as you mentioned. We'll have to see. Unfortunately, the only way to see that if it's actually going to spread across borders is through time. Of course, we hope not. We don't want innocent people, particularly children, contracting this terrible disease. But this is, I would have to say, obvious a result of the kind of destruction of the entire infrastructure in Gaza. When you destroy the wastewater plants, when you destroy the desalination plants, when you destroy hospitals, and when doctors and nurses are killed and medication is denied to enter the Gaza Strip for many, many months, and in many cases permanently, you're going to see these kind of diseases and others emerge. Polio is an obvious one that was eradicated and now coming back as a result of the kind of bombardment and destruction of the infrastructure of Gaza. But I think even worse in many cases is what I mentioned before, the mental health aspect, the trauma that the entire population is going to carry with them the entire lives. How do you raise healthy children to be independent in the future when they've experienced such trauma of violence and have been out of school for nearly a year and will be out of school seemingly for another year? The lack of education is permanent disability for these children. You cannot go back in 2 years and make up the gap in the development of their minds and the development of their intellectual abilities. That's gone forever. So this is even more serious. Yes, polio is a terrible disease. It cripples, it kills, and it's just unconscionable to think that it happened today in 2024 with our support. But even worse is the long-term consequences of an entire population who are going to be showing this significant trauma that they've had to experience. And how do you deal with it? How do you overcome that? How do you rebuild a society of children who are traumatized psychologically? And the source of trauma continues: the bombing, the occupation, the siege, the lack of shelter, the lack of privacy, the lack of toilets, the lack of food, the lack of clean water. This is imposed trauma that's going to, the scars are going to cripple this entire population of children and people in Gaza for generations.
We've heard of humanitarian workers who have been killed by Israeli bombs. And yet, here you are, Heal Palestine. You send people in there. You help people that you can help in there. I need to ask you a personal question. How does Steve continue? Where do you find that strength to continue?
The strength I have is, it's like many people, I think we all look at what's happening there and feel an immense amount of guilt. Not just guilt because I'm an American, it's my bombs. I don't mean, that's an obvious one, and that's I think, easy to define. But I have guilt. We all have some sense of guilt that this is happening to a people who, just by being born in a certain location, have had to endure this unimaginable suffering. So what if they're able to go on and continue and keep their humanity and still try to help their people and work for decency and for good and for freedom? I have to be mentally strong and spiritually strong to continue to support them and to not give up. Whatever hardships I have in my life, and I've had, I lost my first wife to cancer. And
she was Palestinian. She was Palestinian and a doctor. She was a social worker. Yes, that's right. And you also built or had a hospital in Bethlehem. Tell us about that. Is it still there?
It is still there. We've opened a pediatric cancer department in her name, in her honor. I'm very honored about that. And just to finish that question, so partially is that we have a political and ethical responsibility to keep going and not give up. But also, I have also a spiritual belief in life that we have a short time on this earth. God put us here for a reason. Each of us has our own reasons. They're not the same. My reason is to do what I'm doing now. And when I see a child come and without legs and walk again, and the smile on their face and the rebuilding of their spirit and their bodies, despite the genocide that's ongoing and the immenseness of it, if I can help one child or 10 children or 100 or whatever the number, it keeps me going. I can't stop. Even if one child can benefit from whatever efforts I have and whatever abilities I have, then I have to keep going, and that motivates me. So just to finish that, it's a spiritual obligation to serve God and to serve our purpose here and to do good in the face of injustice, hatred, and evilness. And so that's my purpose for keep going. But yeah, we did open a cancer department in my first wife's name, God rest her soul, and that continues to provide children in the West Bank. We had also opened one in Gaza, but that was bombed. I've since remarried. My wife is a pediatric oncologist, my new wife. She's from Sudan, her family, and she is very actively working in evacuating kids from Gaza with cancer to Egypt and Jordan. So she's an amazing person. I hope one day you can interview her, because
we want to.
Yeah, she is an amazing person and has dedicated her life to helping kids with cancer get medical care and get treatment. So, I'm blessed to have two strong women in my life who make me a better man. And my first wife, God rest her soul, and my current wife, both of them are symbols of courage and strength and humanity that I'm very blessed to have built my life with.
Indeed. How are your daughters, by the way? I haven't asked because I know you had two daughters who are half Palestinian, right?
Yeah, both of them
How
are.
do they feel? How do you talk to them? What kind of conversation? How old are they now? What kind of conversation do you have with them?
One is in her 20s, the other has just started university, and both of them are active and feel they both lived and grew up in Palestine. They carry Palestinian passports. They speak Arabic as well as English, and they are like all Palestinians, whether you're half Palestinian or fully Palestinian. Every single one that I know is completely horrified by what's happening, but also dedicated to work for justice, to allow their voice to be heard, to educate, to protest, to support the people of Palestine through this historical injustice that's being committed against them. And I'm very proud that my daughters are involved in those activities as well.
Excellent. Well, the calls have started coming in. You can call. I've only got like 10, maybe 12 minutes left with Steve. 0201-277-0993. Female line is 0201-4657-190. WhatsApp is 0809-597-5805. Calm down. Remember, Steve is not a politician. He's a bit like me. He's a former journalist that's become a humanitarian. I am a former corporate monkey that's become a journalist and humanitarian. So you all need to calm down with the political questions. Steve, you don't know our listeners, honestly. Right, I'm coming to your calls now. Okay, there. Hello. Hello. Okay, you snooze, you lose, I'm afraid. Right. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, good afternoon.
Is this Nigeria Info?
Yes, it is. Hello? Okay. Hello? Hello?
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What's your name? Where are you calling from? And your question, please.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Abangwe. I'm coming from Ikorodu.
Okay, go ahead.
I have to greet your guests, and my question is that, in fact, the worry of every listener to this issue is the long-term effort, because the strategy of the Israelis is to eliminate the Palestinians. So the future expect, because the children of Palestine will grow outside the community and also pose a threat to the Jewish state. How are they going to manage this multilateralism in the long run?
Thank you very much. I'll be back to you, Steve. Just write that down. I've got to answer a couple more calls. Hello?
Okay.
Hello?
Yes, good afternoon. Where are you calling from? Your name and your question, please.
Calling you. This is back calling you.
Okay, go ahead.
My question is similar to the first question. The young children now being horrified and heavily devastated by the war going on there. How are these children going to see Israel as a country later in life? Especially those babies that were put in the, in the, what do you call it, the incubators, and they have to just evict them from that place to another place, even in that incubator. How are these children going to live, and who is going to help them in terms of their mental health? Because the evil is already there. There with the hate and everything is there. Who's going to cure them of all of this?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, good afternoon. Your name, where you're calling from, and your question.
I'm Pastor Badamosi from Surulere.
Okay, go ahead, please.
My question is, how is your guest going to raise funds to help his cause? How is he raising funds?
Oh, how does he raise funds? Okay.
Yes, to help his cause.
Okay. All right. Brilliant question, Pastor Badamosi. Thank you. Right, Steve, I'm going to give you, because at that time now, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to club all of those. The lines are on fire. You don't know our listeners, honestly. The lines are on fire. I'm going to give you 2 minutes so I can stick in a couple more questions.
Let me just say first to your listeners, God bless all of you and your families. I hope you're all safe and well. How do we raise money? So we are a nonprofit organization in the United States, registered in the United States. We have to function under the laws of nonprofit organizations, meaning we have to be completely transparent with how we raise money and how we spend our money. So all of that is available through the U.S. government. We register with the U.S. government, but available on our website, which is healpalestine.org. We raise money through online, of course, through social media, through our website, and also through activities in our community. So we have gala dinners, we have events, and then people take it upon themselves to do events for us. They do concerts, they do different kinds of activities that help to raise money and raise awareness. So obviously that's always a struggle, but the most important thing is we depend on volunteers. So the children that we bring for treatment, they get a very costly medical care, it's free. We don't pay for it. We just cover the expense of bringing the children. So the girl who's coming to Houston, who had her family killed and is having a leg built for her, all of that's donated. We paid her plane ticket. She will stay with a host family who will cover her food and needs every day. They will be supported by the community. And that's where we believe strongly as an organization, people can have a role in helping to rebuild the lives of these children without having to donate your money. You can donate your time, you can donate your goodwill, and donate your heart.
Okay, I need to interrupt you now. Yeah, the last one, because the lines are crazy. Right, what about the children, going forward? The children that have been affected, and is Israel afraid of them, and what's going to happen to them? 1 minute, Steve.
Well, again, I can't answer. I can't answer if anybody is worried about this, but definitely, when any entire generation, every day is being subjected to bombings and killings and losing their friends and family or their own limbs and their own health and being displaced and suffering from such injustice, it is impossible to see that generation will grow up unaffected and they will be part of any kind of future effort to liberate their people and to be part of the resistance. So this is a big concern for everybody who wants to see peace in that region, including myself, is how is that next generation of Palestinians going to be part of any kind of peaceful solution unless there is a final solution that gives them their rights. They have nothing to lose. Many of them have lost their families, have lost their homes, and those are the most kind of dangerous people. If those who your adversaries don't have anything to lose, then you are in a very difficult situation with them.
Thank you. Right, I'm coming to your calls. Hello.
Hello, good afternoon. You're calling from Sulere.
Okay, go ahead. Quickly, your question.
Yes. Our dear brother, may God continue to rest the soul of your late wife, and may God continue to help you in all your endeavors towards, towards this turmoil your people are going through. Then, my question now is this. If the war ends today or tomorrow, what next? Apart from this, how are people like you going to help in in resolving more problems instead of trying to remember what happened? I mean, how are you going to relate with Israel so that this will not happen again?
Okay, thank you. Hello.
Well, it really depends.
Don't worry. Sorry. Let me just answer one more. It's the phone lines are literally on fire. They don't want this to end. Go ahead. Your name, where you're calling from, please.
Yeah, hello, good evening.
Good evening. Your question.
Yeah, this is Chris from Ikeja.
Okay.
Yeah, please, my question goes like this. Between the two political parties in America, which I want your guys to answer the question. So, which of the party is going to be more favorable to what is going on in Gaza?
Okay.
Please, I'm concerned. I want to know.
Okay. All right. And the very last one, I'm just going to squeeze it in. Hello.
Hi, Sisioge. Good evening.
Good evening. Your name, your question. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks to you and your guests for this enlightenment. But my question is, after this whole thing is over, will there be retribution and justice for these children and everyone that has been slain?
Okay.
And, one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Steve. Now you see why I don't open the phone lines early. We would never be able to have a conversation. You've got 2 minutes. I think they're kind of similar anyway. It's again about the kids. What would happen if the war was to end today? How people like you would be able, if there's anything you can do to stop, this sort of this conflict, this madness from resuming. And also, somebody asked about American elections. Who do you think? I told them you're not a politician, but Our people like to hear these
I'm
things.
not a politician, but as I said, everything in politics affects this issue, unfortunately. Clean water, education, healthcare, but also, so I am keen to see if anybody's going to take a moral stance on ending this, particularly in providing the bombs that are killing children in Gaza. That's what our American government is doing and needs to put a stop to it. Is any of the parties going to do that? No. Unfortunately, both of them had indicated, as you mentioned earlier, that Kamala Harris has already said clearly she's not going to put any kind of restrictions on weapons going to Israel. So there will be a continued use of these weapons on the population in Gaza. As far as after the genocide is over, it really depends on what kind of resolution. Is it going to be a comprehensive peace, which we can see equality for all people, regardless of their race, nationality, or ethnicity? Or it will be some continuation of this inequality of occupation and colonialism, which has been going on for generations in Gaza. If that's the case, then the conflict will continue. If it's a comprehensive peace settlement, people, Israelis and Arabs, Jews, Muslims, Christians, all live equal in the same land and share equal rights, then I can see this conflict coming to an end. That's the key for the international community to impose that. The people there cannot impose it on themselves. We've seen that already. And finally, the final question is what to do in the next phase. We as an organization have a plan that we are going to, when the genocide is over and we start to rebuild Gaza, we are going to rebuild the lives of the children, not the buildings, not the infrastructure. Let the governments do that. They have the money. There's good business in that, unfortunately. But for us, we want to rebuild the lives of these children and to give them opportunities to become educated, to become independent, to have lives of meaning and purpose, not to be a genocide generation that the rest of their lives they are waiting for as beggars for anyone to come and give them food or shelter. They can manage this themselves. The Gaza people are among the smartest, most hardworking people in the world, if given the opportunity. We want to help give them the opportunity through a mentorship program to develop leaders and to give them a chance to be to rebuild their lives. It's not going to be easy. We have to undo not only the physical destruction, but the psychological damage that's been done, but that we are committed to this on the long term.
Steve, I wish we could go on. There's so much to cover, but you know what? I'm going to end with this. When Nelson Mandela said, and I quote, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." He was right. But after speaking with you and knowing that there are many Hill Palestinian type humanitarian organizations going in Palestine, I can honestly say that without organizations like yours, we will truly lose our humanity. Thank you for putting the capital H back into the humanity of all of us. Thank you for all you do, Steve. And thank you for being on board.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, and peace to all of our brothers and sisters all over the world, especially in Nigeria. Thank you for having me.
Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. You too, sister.
Let us dive into the
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info. Let's talk.